My name is Naomi Ellery. I was 28 when a single text message made me realize that sometimes the deepest betrayals arrive without anyone raising their voice. By 8 that morning, my 17-year-old daughter, Lily, had already tied her hair into a loose knot and covered the kitchen table with handwritten recipes. She had spent weeks planning my mother's 71st birthday dinner. 23 relatives were coming, and she wanted every dish to carry a memory. "This one is Grandma's lemon chicken," she whispered, carefully measuring herbs. "I hope she remembers teaching me." I smiled, even though I knew my mother's affection had always been unpredictable. Some days she praised Lily for her kindness. Other days, she barely noticed she was in the room. I kept telling myself people mellowed with age. Hope has a strange way of surviving evidence. By afternoon, the house smelled of roasted garlic, fresh bread, cinnamon, and slow-cooked stew. Every counter disappeared beneath bowls wrapped in clean towels. Lily checked each place card twice, smoothing imaginary wrinkles with nervous fingertips. She wasn't cooking because anyone had asked her to. She was cooking because she believed love could be served warm. At 5:12 p.m., just as I reached for the serving platters, my phone vibrated. It was my mother. Change of plans. Everyone's meeting at Bellamy Restaurant instead. Adults only. Don't bother bringing the food. I read the message twice. Then a third time. Behind me, Lily looked up with flowers still dusted across her cheek. "Is Grandma here already?" For a moment, I couldn't answer, because I knew that whatever happened next would become one of those memories a family never admits creating. I folded my phone without saying a word. For a few quiet seconds, the only sound in the kitchen was the gentle bubbling of soup on the stove. Lily was humming to herself as she arranged fresh rosemary around the serving tray, completely unaware that every plan she'd carefully built had just been erased by a message that took less than 10 seconds to type. I hated that I was about to be the one to deliver it. "Lily," I began, but the word caught somewhere between my throat and my heart. She turned toward me with the hopeful smile only 17-year-olds seem capable of wearing after a day of hard work. "Did Grandma say they're almost here?" I handed her the phone instead. She read the message once. Then again, slower this time. The smile didn't disappear all at once. It simply faded, as if someone had quietly dimmed a light inside her. "So," she asked softly, "they're all going to the restaurant?" I nodded. "And I'm not invited?"
"No."
She stared at the screen for another moment before locking it and placing it gently on the counter. That tiny gesture hurt more than tears would have. There was no anger, no dramatic reaction. Only a careful effort to stay composed. "I guess I misunderstood," she whispered. "I thought Grandma wanted everyone together." "You didn't misunderstand," I said. "You believed what she told you." Weeks earlier, my mother had called Lily personally, telling her, "Your cooking always brings the family together. I'd love for you to make my birthday dinner." Lily had written those words in her notebook like they were an award she never expected to receive. Now they felt like a promise quietly withdrawn. The kitchen suddenly seemed too full, of food, of silence, of expectations with nowhere to go. I looked across the counters at everything my daughter had created with such care. 23 portions. Fresh desserts cooling by the window. Handmade place cards with every relative's name written in neat blue ink. None of it had been rushed. Every dish carried hours of attention. Every detail carried hope. Lily reached for an oven mitt and quietly turned off the last burner. "I don't want the food to burn," she said, almost apologetically. That was when I realized something painful. She wasn't trying to save dinner. She was trying to save her dignity. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. She stood still for a moment before leaning into the hug, taking one slow breath as if she were trying to hold herself together without letting the disappointment spill over. Outside, the evening sun slipped behind the trees, leaving long shadows across our dining room table, 23 empty chairs waiting for guests who had already decided to celebrate somewhere else. And as I looked at those untouched plates, an unexpected thought quietly settled in my mind. I wasn't going to argue with my mother, but I wasn't going to let this evening end the way she expected either. After Lily went upstairs to wash the flour from her hands, I stayed alone in the kitchen. The silence felt unfamiliar. Only an hour earlier, it had been filled with timers chiming, cabinet doors opening, and Lily asking me to taste one more sauce. Now, every room seemed to be waiting for people who were never coming. I picked up the stack of handwritten place cards she'd spent the previous evening decorating. Each name had been written in careful blue ink, with a tiny pressed flower tucked into the corner. My brother, my cousins, my aunt, even my mother. None of them would ever know how much thought had gone into something so small. As I gathered the cards, an old memory surfaced. I was 12 when my mother canceled my piano recital at the last minute because my older brother had won a baseball tournament. "There will be other recitals," she'd said while helping him polish his trophy. Family should celebrate the biggest achievement. I remembered sitting in the back seat, recital dress wrinkled beneath my coat, pretending I wasn't crying because I didn't want anyone to feel guilty. Some disappointments don't disappear with time. They simply learn to wait. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Lily stood in the doorway, wearing an oversized sweater, her eyes still a little red but calm. "I'm sorry," she said. I looked at her, confused. For what? For making such a big deal out of dinner. My heart tightened. "You didn't make a big deal," I answered gently. "You made a beautiful one." She looked around the kitchen, then quietly asked, "What are we going to do with all this food?" I glanced at the long dining table before another idea slowly took shape. Not from anger, but from everything my daughter deserved to remember about this day. "We're going to make sure none of your effort is wasted," I said. That evening, instead of calling my mother, I opened our neighborhood community page. I typed a simple message. "We have a home-cooked birthday dinner prepared for 23 people. If anyone is working late, living alone, or simply needs a warm meal tonight, our table is open." I hesitated before pressing post. Then I looked at Lily. She gave me the smallest nod. I smiled back and tapped the screen. Within minutes, the first reply appeared. Then another. And another. By the time I looked up again, our quiet, empty dining room was about to welcome guests we had never planned for, people who, unlike our own relatives, already understood the value of being invited. The first knock came less than half an hour later. When I opened the door, an elderly man stood on the porch holding a small bouquet of grocery store daisies. He smiled shyly. "I saw your post," he said. "My wife passed away last winter. This is the first birthday dinner I've been invited to in a long time. I didn't want to arrive empty-handed." I couldn't speak for a second. I simply stepped aside and welcomed him in. After him came a young nurse finishing a 12-hour shift, still wearing her hospital badge. Then a university student whose family lived overseas. A widowed neighbor from 2 streets away. A father with his 8-year-old son after their evening plans had fallen through. One by one, strangers crossed our doorway with hesitant smiles, each apologizing for accepting an invitation from someone they had never met. By the time every chair was filled, the house felt different. Not louder, warmer. The conversations didn't compete with one another. They drifted through the room like familiar music. People asked Lily about her recipes, complimented the homemade bread, and wanted to know how she had learned to season the stew so perfectly. For the first time that evening, I saw her shoulders relax. She wasn't trying to prove herself anymore. She was simply sharing something she loved. Near the end of dinner, the elderly man gently lifted his glass of iced tea. "I'd like to say something," he began. The room fell quiet. "I don't know your family," he said, looking toward Lily, "but I do know what it feels like to wonder whether your effort matters." Tonight reminded me that kindness doesn't disappear just because the wrong people fail to notice it. He turned to my daughter. "You cooked for 23 people. We may not be the ones you expected, but I hope we're enough." Lily's eyes filled with tears she had held back all evening. She smiled through them. "You are," she whispered. "More than enough." Around the table, heads nodded in quiet agreement. No one asked about the relatives who never came. No one needed an explanation. Somehow, they all understood that this dinner wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about honoring the love that had already been given. As I began clearing the plates, my phone buzzed against the countertop. One message, then another. Then several more. They were all from my family. Apparently, someone at the restaurant had finally noticed our community post, and the photos now spreading online of a dining room full of grateful strangers gathered around the meal they had walked away from. I looked at the glowing screen, but didn't open a single message. Not yet. For the first time that day, I realized the truth had started speaking for itself. I didn't read the messages until the last guest had gone home. The dishes were stacked beside the sink, the candles had burned low, and the house carried that quiet stillness that follows an evening filled with honest conversation. Lily had gone upstairs with a notebook tucked under her arm. Before disappearing into her room, she hugged me a little longer than usual. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for fixing anything.
Just for staying."
When I finally unlocked my phone, the family group chat was overflowing. My aunt wrote first. "What happened? Why are people sharing photos from your house?" A cousin followed. "Mom said dinner was canceled because it was too much work." Nobody mentioned Lily had already cooked everything. Then came another. "Those meals looked incredible. We thought you weren't hosting anymore." I kept scrolling, noticing the same pattern repeating itself. Confusion, not accusation. No one seemed to know the whole story. At the bottom sat my mother's message, shorter than all the others. "You embarrassed me." I stared at those 3 words for a long time, not because they hurt, because they revealed what mattered most to her. She hadn't asked how Lily was feeling. She hadn't apologized for changing the plans. She hadn't wondered whether hours of effort had been wasted. Her first concern was embarrassment. I set the phone down and walked into the dining room. The place cards were still scattered across the table. Most had never been used, but one remained beside an empty plate, Lily's careful handwriting spelling grandma in soft blue ink. I traced the edge of the card with my finger. It reminded me that disappointment often begins long before the moment we recognize it. The next morning, I found Lily sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight settle over the garden. She looked peaceful, but quieter than usual. "I kept thinking about something," she said. "What is it?" "I spent weeks trying to make Grandma happy." She paused, turning the warm cup between her hands. "But last night, those strangers thanked me like I'd given them something special." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I was cooking for the wrong people." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "No," I said gently. "You were cooking from the right heart." At that moment, another notification lit up my phone. This time it wasn't from family. It was from the community page. Hundreds of people had shared our story. One local reporter had sent a polite message asking if they could tell it, not as a story about rejection, but as one about unexpected kindness. I looked at the screen, then back at Lily. Neither of us knew it yet, but my mother's single text message had started a conversation far bigger than our family dinner. By Monday morning, our quiet evening had become something neither Lily nor I had planned. The community post had been shared hundreds of times. People weren't interested because a family dinner had been canceled. They were responding to something much simpler. A teenager had spent an entire day cooking with love, and when that love wasn't received, she chose to share it instead of throwing it away. The comments stayed with me. This reminded me to call my grandmother. "I wish someone had invited my father after my mother died. Please tell Lily she made strangers feel seen." I read a few aloud over breakfast. Lily listened with her cereal untouched, her cheeks turning pink every time someone praised her cooking. "I don't think I deserve all this," she said quietly. I smiled. "You aren't being thanked because you're perfect." She looked up. "You're being thanked because you were generous, even after being hurt." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she folded the paper napkin into tiny squares, the way she always did when she was thinking. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it ring once.
Twice.
Then I answered. Her voice sounded carefully controlled. "You've made this into a public spectacle." I took a slow breath before replying. "I didn't post about you. You didn't have to. People are making assumptions." "No," I said gently. "They're responding to what actually happened." Silence settled between us. Finally, she asked, "Why didn't you tell everyone the dinner had changed?" I closed my eyes for a moment. Because it hadn't changed for us.
She didn't respond.
For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to convince her to understand my feelings. I was simply telling the truth without raising my voice. Before ending the call, I said one more thing. Lily never wanted an apology in front of everyone. She just wanted the chance to share the meal she worked so hard to make. Another long pause. Then my mother spoke so softly I almost missed it. I didn't think she'd take it so personally. I looked out the kitchen window, where Lily was watering the herbs she had used in that dinner. That's the problem, I replied. She didn't take it personally. I paused. She made it personally. Every recipe, every place card, every hour in that kitchen, she gave your birthday pieces of herself. The line was quiet. No excuses came this time. Only the sound of someone sitting with a truth they could no longer explain away. When the call ended, I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter, not because my mother had changed, but because I had finally stopped carrying the weight of pretending nothing had happened. 3 days passed before my mother asked if she could come over. She didn't suggest a restaurant this time. She didn't ask me to meet halfway. Her message was unusually simple. If Lily is comfortable, I'd like to see both of you. I read it twice before showing it to my daughter. She was kneading bread dough at the counter, her hands moving with the same quiet rhythm they always had. For a moment, she didn't answer. She just pressed the dough gently beneath her palms, thinking. Do I have to decide right now? She asked. No, I said. You don't owe anyone a quick answer. The next afternoon, she nodded. She can come. When my mother arrived, she looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in the way people do when certainty has left them. She stood at our front door holding a worn recipe box I hadn't seen in years. I found this in the attic, she said. It belonged to your great-grandmother. We sat around the same dining table that had once held 23 untouched place cards. No one hurried to fill the silence. My mother finally slid the recipe box toward Lily. I remembered you asking about these when you were little, she said. I kept saying I'd give them to you someday. Lily opened the lid carefully. Inside were stained index cards, each marked with faded handwriting, tiny notes in the margins, and flour-smudged fingerprints from another generation. They're beautiful, Lily whispered. My mother nodded, but her eyes stayed on the table. I owe you something more than recipes. The room became very still. I thought changing the plans was practical, she said. The restaurant seemed easier. I convinced myself you'd understand. She looked at Lily for the first time. I never stopped to imagine what the day had meant to you. There was no dramatic speech. No desperate attempt to erase what had happened. Just an honest admission that couldn't change the past. Lily closed the recipe box and rested both hands on top of it. I was hurt, she said softly. Not because of the restaurant. She took a slow breath. I was hurt because I felt invisible. My mother's eyes filled with quiet tears. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She simply listened. For our family, that was something entirely new. And somehow, it felt like the first real step toward becoming people who could finally hear one another. A month later, I found one of Lily's handwritten place cards tucked inside the old recipe box. Not the one that said Grandma. A blank one. On the back, in her neat blue handwriting, she had written, "A seat saved for whoever chooses kindness." I held it for a long time before slipping it back between the recipe cards. Somehow, it belonged there, as much a family heirloom as the recipes themselves. Life didn't become perfect after that afternoon. My mother and I still disagreed. Some conversations were awkward, and some old habits returned before fading again. Healing, I learned, doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, asking only that people keep choosing honesty over pride. But something had changed. My mother started calling Lily, not to ask for favors, but to ask how school was going or what she was baking that weekend. The conversations were short at first, almost cautious, like two people learning a language neither had spoken before. One Saturday, Lily invited her over to make the lemon chicken that had never reached the birthday table. This time, there were no place cards, no guest list, no expectations to impress anyone. Just 3 generations standing shoulder to shoulder in a warm kitchen, passing measuring spoons, laughing when the sauce nearly boiled over, and arguing, good-naturedly, about whether the rosemary should go in before or after the butter. I stayed back for a moment, watching sunlight spill across the countertop. The same kitchen that had once held 23 untouched meals now held something far more nourishing: understanding. Looking back, people sometimes ask if I regret opening our home to strangers that night. I always give the same answer:
No.
because that dinner taught my daughter a lesson I could never have explained with words alone. Love isn't measured by the people who reject it. It's revealed by the people who receive it with gratitude. My mother's text had canceled a celebration. It did not cancel my daughter's kindness. And in the end, that kindness became the story our family finally chose to remember. Not as the night everything fell apart, but as the evening we discovered that the fullest tables are built not by obligation, but by open hearts. Whenever I see that little blank place card resting inside the recipe box, I'm reminded that every family leaves an empty seat for the future. The question is never who deserves it. The question is who will choose to fill it with compassion. If this story touched your heart, remember that kindness is never wasted, even when it's given to the wrong people. Sometimes the family we hope for isn't the family we begin with, but the one we help create through honesty, grace, and compassion. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes kindness is stronger than cruelty. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Naomi's place? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.